Hey everybody, and welcome back to Laravel Podcast Season 7. I'm your host, Matt Stauffer, CEO of Titan, and in this season I'll be joined every episode by a member of the Laravel team. And today I'm talking to André Valentin, the Director of Engineering at Laravel. He's kind of a big deal. André, can you say hi to everybody and share a little bit about what you do at Laravel?
Yeah, hi everybody. So I basically help unblock, I think is a good word, unblock all the engineering teams that we have here at Laravel, as well as try to put in, process, think about leadership, strategy, all these kinds of things, security, even IT, all the things that other people also don't want to do.
Yeah. The buck stops with you when it comes to technology, basically.
Basically, yes.
Okay, got it. I love that. So you know that one of the first things I like to ask everybody is kind of, what were you doing before Laravel, whether, 10 years ago or 2 years ago? And what was the process of coming to Laravel like for you? What, who connected you, and, just kind of what was that experience like?
Yeah, I think this is a great question because everybody has such a fun answer. I think for me personally, the Jess and Tim one is my all-time favorite. I remember when
it's amazing.
I remember when I had my first one-on-one with Jess. She basically told me the story, and I was like, "How is this real life? I've never heard about anything like that before." But that was so much fun. So my story is not quite as intense, I would say, but I think it's also somewhat interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back a little bit. I mean, my entry to PHP and Laravel, I feel like most people say this. I don't know why, but it must have been a popular release. But around like 4.1, 4.2, thereabouts, that's sort of when I entered the Laravel space. And the reason why I did that was because I was working on a small sort of startup at the time. I was home rolling like my own Laravel framework, or not my own PHP framework, because I thought, there's nothing out there that kind of suits my needs. Of course, you got to build your own. There's no other way around it. So I was doing that, and actually thought that was quite fun, but it was slow. And, you hit every single pain point that you could possibly hit.
Yep.
So one day, actually, my front-end developer on the project, it was basically just the two of us. He said, if I'd seen this thing, Laravel, and, I hadn't. So he sent me some links to Reddit. And it looked really, really cool. And I think sort of like everyone else, or like most people, I think they go to the documentation first. And it was just so well thought through, well laid out. It was clear. It was beautiful. That was sort of like the very early days of me and Laravel, I would say. And it sort of stuck, actually, even though my professional career and background is a little bit zigzag.
Yeah.
I kind of started out doing customer support, actually. That's how I got into, that was my first job. It was customer support at a sort of a telecom company, the biggest one in Denmark. And, since then I tried to get into code, but without doing any sort of traditional schooling. So I'm self-taught. And, people don't necessarily want to pay you to code if they don't know that you can do it. So it's like, you get in somewhere and you try to, can I build this internal tool? Which I can recommend anyone who wants to try to get into code. I think that's a great way.
Yeah.
Kind of work my way up, honestly. And one day I was fortunate enough, and this is a little bit of a wild story. I was fortunate enough to interview at a company called Tradeshift. I joined Tradeshift as a integration engineer, which is sort of like a hybrid support, sort of a dev, but you're working, connecting sort of business systems. So EDI files, if that, says anything to you, which is business, electronic business documents, invoices and stuff like that. Pretty dry, but anyways, it was a job, and it was the first one that would pay me to code. So I was not too unhappy about that.
Yeah.
My manager at the time, and the person who actually hired me, was Ferry, who is now the head of support,
right? Yeah.
who is now the head of support at Laravel. So, small world, but obviously, if you know good people, you kind of tend to take them with you. But anyways, so he hired me and gave me a shot, and he's actually the first one who I would say really believed in me and kind of gave me a shot at also managing a team, because Tradeshift was a hyper growth company. We came in as an engineer, did Laravel again. built all our internal tooling for support and stuff like that. And eventually, we grew and grew and grew, and it was like, okay, we need more people that do what you do. Can you please hire them? And I'm like, oh yeah, I know this guy who I used to do the startup with. So then I hired that guy from before, I mentioned before, the front-end engineer.
Uh-huh.
And we became a small team after a while. And then after, some more years, we ended up being not so small of a team. And I had a team in Romania and some people in Denmark and, worked a lot in the US and flew to China for work every few weeks as well. So
wow.
It was a wild time. It was hyper growth is no joke in any company, especially back in those days. I don't know if it's quite the same anymore, but it was wild. So that was sort of how I got into management, that somebody gave me said, okay, you seem to be doing this well. Can you please make sure other people also do it well?
Yeah.
And that's, and I was like, yeah, sure. Let's go. Turns out it's not super easy, and it's also not,
it's not the same skill set, right?
No, it's not at all the same skill set. So there's this typical mistake I think people make at these companies where they just promote the best person on the team and then go you can be the manager now. And that person doesn't necessarily want to be a manager, but it's the only way to progress your career or something like that. So yeah, it's not great, but kind of stuck with it, tried to get better, read a lot of books. And kind of did that for a while until just about before COVID, I think. Then we had big layoffs. So there was poorly timed by the company because everybody was laying people off during COVID. My company decided to lay people off just before COVID, so they would really look like the bad guys.
Yeah.
Essentially we laid a bunch of people off. I was still left, but with fewer people, and motivation wasn't really there. Plus I'd been there for over 5 years at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of while I was on vacation with my now wife, actually, I received a recruiter call from a smaller company called Worksum in Denmark, and they were looking for a VP of engineering for a Laravel shop. And I was like, holy moly. Yeah. That is a dream opportunity. And at what a time, because, we were just going through all of these layoffs and restructurings, and, the morale was kind of down for everyone, even the ones who didn't get laid off. So, I was like, oh, this sounds like kind of a dream opportunity, big step up career-wise, at least on paper, which is important to note, I think. Yeah. But yeah, definitely, something fun and new to try. And, we went through the interviews and I ended up joining. I was VP of engineering of 3 people, I think, in the beginning. So, the titling is always funny, I think.
Yep.
That's another story for a different day, but titling is always funny. But we did grow, and, the idea was that I would scale the team and take my experience from Tradeshift, scale it up to Worksum. Doing that for quite a long time as well, until we were about 100 plus people, which was around the time where I had my first daughter. So that's a big change in your life. Yeah. As I'm sure you know. So that led me to reflect on kind of what I wanted, and should I try something new? And yeah, there were lots of reasons, to be honest. There are always lots of reasons to make changes. Yeah. And then I I joined Unity, kind of got referred by an old colleague, and worked on a very strange project where we did sort of international sort of compliance.
Okay.
Sort of intellectual property stuff between the US and China. You can't export all code from the US to China if it has cryptography and all these kind of things. Very hairy, very technical. But it turned out Unity also kind of hit the SERP bubble. And, my literal first week at the job, they fired 1,000 people or something like that. But I don't know how they didn't lay me off, because I had just joined. Why wouldn't you get rid of me? Yeah. I don't know. But they thought my project was important. So instead, what they did was they took away all the headcount I was supposed to hire and just left me there. So I was there as a kind of senior manager at the company with one person on my team, and I was supposed to, I think, hire 10 or 12 or something to do this more many millions of dollar project. yeah, anyways, that didn't really turn out. I stayed for about a year, gave it a shot. Also like, some good people there, but, did the learnings. I took the learnings I could.
Yeah.
And one day, and I went back today to look at what day this actually was because I thought it was interesting, but it was the 22nd of January, 2024.
Okay.
Taylor Otwell tweeted. Sorry, this is a very long story.
Great.
He tweeted and said, hey, we are doing something ambitious this year and coming years. Does anybody want to be head of engineering for Laravel? And I was like, that's a funny coincidence, but also, how am I ever going to get that job? So I think we've heard that story before from other people who have been on this podcast. And yeah, it's a funny one because, I came home that day from work because I think I saw it at work, the tweet, and I was talking to my wife who kind of knows what Laravel is, but like maybe not deeply. Right. But she knows I've worked with it for years and kind of like, what it is in broad strokes. And my wife was saying, we were talking about the tweet and stuff. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. What a dream job. And she's like, oh, so did you apply? And I was like, oh, no, there's like, basically no shot. And like, do they need someone like me who's kind of taking a little bit more of the corporate route and stuff like that? Because I knew also the team was kind of small.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I don't think that it makes any sense really. Even though the job description sounded perfect.
Yeah.
And she's like, you are an idiot. Please go and apply to this job right now. This, what you just gotta, like, what do you have to lose basically? And my wife is quite right. She often is quite right.
Yeah.
So basically I sat down and wrote like an application, sent it over, and I don't think it took that many hours. And then I had an email back from Taylor Otwell saying, hey, love your resume. Are you up for talking? I'm like, holy moly. That's that. First of all, that was really fast. I mean, he must have been waiting for my application. I can only imagine. But at the same time, yeah, I don't know. It felt a little bit surreal because, I've also been to Laracons before. I've done the whole thing. And he, you can't help but fanboy a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was obviously accepted. And, the day after we were on a Google Meet and, chatted for, I don't know, half an hour maybe, about just kind of what I'd done and, my view on leadership and hiring and, these kind of things and kind of also what their plans were, because that's the only thing I didn't really know. I had no idea, like, about Excel or any of these things.
Yeah.
But I was kind of let in on that and, that, kind of struck a chord with me because I've definitely done that before. I've done the whole, we get investment, we hire a bunch of people, we, gotta execute on this like big vision. Yeah. That was right up my alley. So all of a sudden I went from, I don't know if they can use someone like me to, yeah, I'm definitely the right person for
done
this.
That before, yeah.
Yeah, I've done that before. And then some, plus all of the compliance aspects and stuff like that, that they wanted someone to own as well. I had kind of done that in most companies I've worked at, honestly, beforehand. So yeah, I thought to myself, after the call, I think I sent him an email first and was like, I thought it went really well. I can see that Laracon EU is coming up in, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks from that time. That's Amsterdam is not so far from Copenhagen. I can just fly over and meet you if you want to meet me in person. And he immediately accepted and was like, that's a great idea. Let's get that booked right away. And I was talking to my wife and I was like, oh my God, I gotta take some days off work and fly to Amsterdam. And my biggest problem with doing all of that, it was really exciting, but my biggest problem with doing all of that was I knew quite a lot of people in the Laravel community, and people knew that I was working at Unity, and Unity has nothing to do with Laravel. So it's like, I know some people go to Laravel cons, on their own money and like kind of are there for the vibes. But I mean, I would imagine most people get like, tickets purchased by their company and these kind of things. So I ran into like former colleagues and they're like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I was just, seeing friends, like, hi, how are you doing? Yeah, just like all for the vibes and for the talks and, whatever. You can grab a beer later and whatnot. And yeah, in reality, I was, first meeting with Tom, I think, and then I was meeting with Taylor, and I was, obviously, I actually met the investors there as well. They were both, both the people on the team at back then were there. So yeah, I kind of went through the system, you could say, and left the conference the day after, flew home, and was like, okay, I definitely need to get this job. And then, I feel like a few days later, I forget who it was, but I think Tom or Taylor, one of them reached out and was like, hey, we'd like to talk again and stuff like that. And then, we had some more conversations. And here we are, then we agreed that was a good fit and got everything to work. And then I started. Sorry, that was a very long story, but
it's okay.
But yeah, that's definitely how I got into PHP, how I got into leadership, and how I joined Laravel.
I love it. And you knocked out some of my questions. So I'm like, thank you for that. Appreciate that. So
You're welcome.
You got into Laravel, you show up on day one, and Laravel at this point is an open source, project with, I don't know, dozens of individual teams together with, or individual projects, together with also a software as a service, several software as a services, paid things. Where do you start at that point? Are you primarily focused on the paid stuff? Like, how do you even, because that's, prior to you, your role was the founder, you also wrote half the stuff. So you were kind of creating something that didn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked a lot about that in the beginning, kind of how do I fit in? Because the team also didn't know, kind of who I was. And that was also a very intimidating thing for me, weirdly maybe, but coming in and it's like, oh, it's James and it's Joe and it's Nuno and it's Jess. Right. And it's like,
these people, right?
How am I, why would they listen to me? I think that was my first thought is why would they listen to me? I'm coming in as the new boss and it's like, it feels a bit weird. Yeah. But I had kind of, experienced it before, I guess. But the people I was then managing weren't kind of rock stars in their community. So that was a little bit more intimidating, I would say. But I tried to kind of do what I do, I think, which I think I'm good at. So having a lot of empathy for people, really listening, trying to level with people, kind of, I scheduled one-on-ones with everyone. I was really trying to, that was not my first week, but sort of week 2, maybe. I think that's when we started talking to everyone, being like, okay, what do you want? And there are so many changes coming. I mean, I can tell you there are changes coming that I don't think you are prepared for. Yeah. And how can we make this better for you? How can I help you achieve your goals? So the beginning days were really important. I mean, lots of listening, lots of learning, but also kind of seeing, okay, what kind of potential do we have in the current group? What do we need to hire for? All of these things. But to maybe get back to your question a little bit on what did day one look like? I did this thing where I pushed pretty hard to meet Taylor in person. For me, this is actually my first ever remote job, which is, I'm sure we can come back to that, but that was not something I knew I would, I was sure about I would like. I knew I wanted to work at Laravel and I wanted to have this job. But I was, the one thing I was really unsure about was the remote thing, because I love spending time with people in person. Yeah. But it turns out this is actually quite great, especially when you have a young family. You are a little bit more flexible with your time. I work lots of nights after the kids are in bed, but then, I can do all the drop-offs and the pickups and all of this kind of stuff, and I can be there for all the dinners, or most of the dinners. But yeah, that's it's such a difference. But because it was remote and I only basically know in person, I was like, I want my onboarding to be in person. I was telling Taylor, I think we should meet in person, for my first week. What do you say? And he was like, yeah, let's go. Okay. So I took 4 flights to get to Little Rock from Copenhagen. I don't even remember the route anymore. It was a nightmare because I think you can get there faster, by the way. It's just, it was very expensive because it was kind of last minute. But yeah, eventually got there, had to sleep in Washington because I missed a late connection somewhere. but that's also an adventure. Got picked up in Little Rock Airport again, a surreal moment by Taylor, and we drove back to Little Rock and sat at like a co-working space, basically for a week. So I was staying at a hotel, and he even had me over for dinner one night with the family, and which they are so sweet. Yeah. So amazing family that he has, and so that was amazing to get to know him as a person a little bit, which was kind of my goal, I think.
Yeah.
Because he was such a mystical creature. It's like, how do you actually, connect to Taylor and like do a good job and all these kind of things. Find out like what does he actually want from you. Yeah. And I thought the best way was to get to know him in person a little bit. And, I think that was a great trip, and, I would have definitely done that again if I could.
That's a very cool idea.
Yeah. So that was my first week, and we were literally setting up, Google Workspace. I think I set up like Google Workspace for the company on my first day. Uh-huh. So asking about what I did on my first day, it was a lot of IT infrastructure that we didn't have. We didn't have a password manager, bought that. It was like, okay, I think I just kind of need your credit card, and then I'm going to set up some things. And then, he was giving me all the passwords and was like, you own all of this now. And I'm like, great. Yeah. I know what to do with this. So that was, felt very at home with all of those kind of tasks and all the, like, weirdly, I'm like super into the admin stuff as well. So I don't know if that's like a weird fetish or something, but I know some people hate it, but I quite like it.
But also I like automating.
So. Yeah, I also like automating all these things. So that's kind of the stage we're at right now, which is like, a year and some months later, is that we're starting to slowly get like single sign-on in place and all of these things. But other than that, the main focus for me has always been and is, I think, mainly going to continue on the commercial side of the company. Yeah, okay. That was kind of part of your question, is like open source versus commercial. Like, how do you, what do you actually work on? And I mean, for me, it's mostly commercial. I mean, I would say that in spirit, I'm also Joe T's manager, but that's more like, again, in spirit or in the org chart. He's definitely directed by Taylor. Taylor is, the man when it comes to open source at Laravel, and will always be, I think, unless something drastic happens. But yeah, I think that's the case. And other than that, I see myself most valuable when all the commercial teams and kind of helping with structuring and hiring and strategy, performance, all the typical things, I would say.
Yeah. It's interesting because people often, when we think about a director of engineering, because it's such a technical name and it's a leadership position in a technical place, we think very much about, so you're hands-on in the code and you're actually involved in every project. What's your level? Like, what's the deepest you go into any one project?
It depends actually a little bit on the project. Okay. So I see myself, and I try to be as useful as I can anywhere. I think that's basically, that has to be the starting point. And also, I don't want to be a blocker. I want to be, I don't want to be like, you have to go through me to make these decisions, anything like that. I mean, I'm never gonna do that unless it's like super critical for some reason. Then maybe, but other than that, not really. I don't go super deep. So for Laravel Cloud, I think I helped a little bit. I had built sort of a platform as a service before, but internally at a company. And that was kind of I took a lot of inspiration actually from that, and was like kind of the process, the pain points, and also knowing that this would be a very valuable product to the right teams out there. Yeah. Because I went into that project very naive and was like, we'll just, hire a DevOps person, we'll throw out some like YAML, whatever they do. And then, we create some stuff on Amazon, and Bob's your uncle, and people can like, submit a PR, and then there's another service. Yeah. Turns out it's a little bit more involved than that. Yeah. Well, it's basically that, but doing that is very complicated. And doing it at scale is even harder, and like, sort of achieving any kind of flexibility within it. So, kind of taking the learnings from that, helping make the decision around should we go kind of serverless fully? Should we go something more serverful? all of this that we did early on, like just being part of those conversations on how to architect the system, what kind of tools should we use, basically, yeah, and also what kind of people should we hire to actually build this thing, and getting involved a little bit on the AWS side. So I have always had a fondness from early on in my career on like servers and infra. So even though I'm like not specifically like head of infra or anything like that, that's always where I kind of lean to involve myself more than other places. You always try to, work with the stuff that you actually know you're good at. Yeah. So I try to help a little bit more on the infra side than on the app side, because the app side people are here very good and don't need my help.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically it. And on Nightwatch, haven't really been super involved, I would say. Again, I help with all the compliance things. I help organize, certain things, but yeah, I don't get deep into the projects or into the code. It's all about people, expectation setting, communicating between teams. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So do you, like, how much are you defining? So we've kind of said like how much you are involved in any individual project, but
yeah,
are you involved in defining how we code or how we work or how we communicate? Or is that very much kind of like each team brings their own kind of style to it?
That's a really good question, because it's something that we have spent quite a bit of time talking about internally. So I guess that means I am a little bit involved in that as well. We tried to figure out, actually, because we, went from being like one team, everybody's kind of doing their own thing, to, okay, now we like, we set down some product teams. There are some people on those teams, like how should they actually work? And in the beginning, because we were building a brand new thing for Cloud and Nightwatch, they were just like, they were running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, sprinting, and like, well, I say sprinting, but I don't mean agile sprinting.
Yes.
Yeah, they were running very fast and kind of like really getting things done without much process. Let's put it like that. The process was we meet once in a while, like once a week maybe, and we talk about kind of how we're doing. Do we have any bloggers? So it was really magical, to be honest. It still is, but that time was special.
Yeah.
And on the core services team, which is Forge, Envoy, and Vapor, we were trying some different things. We relatively early on decided to use Linear as a tool. I might be one of the only people in the world that like Jira.
You might be.
I might be. I quite like Jira, and I don't know what that says about me, but people don't usually say nice things when they hear that. No. So, so I asked people, what tool would you like to work with? Because I knew I was not gonna, I knew if I just went in there and pressed purchase on the Atlassian Jira license, then people would be like, who is this guy? And how do we get rid of him? I was trying to be a little bit more diplomatic, which led to Linear being the tool of choice. And it's honestly been quite good. I still miss some of the flexibility that Jira gives you. It's a very mature product that can do basically anything you want, which is part of the problem, I think.
Yeah.
So they were trying a little bit more and adding some process around like how they were working, because they were not building a brand new project. They were like kind of figuring out, okay, we have this new team. How do we actually structure and work with that? So they were kind of the testing ground for a lot of these things.
Yeah.
But then after Cloud launched, it became apparent that we needed process and that we needed to like figure out how to actually work more coherently across the company and create some sort of unity, even though we have people in Australia and some people in US and some people in Europe and all over the place. And we decided on together with, I have to give Calvin from the Cloud team a lot of credit here, because he led, let's say, the discovery. I think he took input from other people, but then, he led the discovery and like kind of came up with a suggestion saying, shouldn't we all just try basically shape up? So that's I don't know if that's like a niche way of working, but it's a little bit less well known than Scrum and Kanban and other ways. And we adapted it to our own, let's say, unique structure as well, which I think is fine. I am a big fan of that. So we're doing kind of a hybrid shape up and trying to, let's say, tell teams this is the general idea that we want you to report in when reporting progress and all these kind of things. Here are like the like you put your projects here. Here's where you should put the progress. But then kind of how you connect that to how you work on a day-to-day, completely up to you.
Okay.
Because,
cool.
In Australia or like the APAC team, I should not say Australia, but the APAC team, like they are doing things a little bit different than anywhere else. They sit on Tuple most days and work together, and everything goes like, say, is quite synchronous actually.
Yeah.
And other teams are very asynchronous, and report on status and projects in a different way. But we knew that from a, let's say, high level leadership perspective, we wanted the same level of visibility into all of the projects. So we're trying to architect that in a way and kind of set that up in linear. And that's sort of the approach we've gone with. I'm a very strong believer in teams should be able to choose the way they want to work, as long as it doesn't mess up, let's say, the information flow. And I think we've landed on a pretty good spot. Definitely always room for improvement, but yeah.
I mean, I love that it's very similar to my experience kind of bringing our team into larger organizations, which we do very often, which is we want to make sure that you have access to the information that you need. And also our team is now not all of a sudden, 5 to 10% slower because we're building in processes that don't make sense for us. And our project managers are trying to do that same adaptation that you're doing.
Yeah.
We have some teams that have used Linear. We have some teams that have used ShapeUp. I personally am old and I'm the CEO now, so I'm not on projects day to day. So I'm still in Trello. I'm just like, Trello, Kanban is the dream for me, but I recognize that you can do Kanban-esque work in other tools. So,
and as a worker, I also think Kanban is the way to go. I would never, I think estimation, generally speaking, is a waste of time. I mean, you can do it, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. I think, that's a whole other podcast, but yeah, I think estimation and like all the meetings, what are you trying to get to achieve it? I think you should everybody should take a hard look at themselves and saying, why are we doing these things? Yeah. And then, try to maybe start fresh and okay, let's build up to something rather than have all this process and then try to follow some book that somebody else wrote, 20 years ago.
Completely different setting. Yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't apply anymore. Different industry as well.
You and I could talk so long about this. We're going to have to do that. Yeah. I keep telling everyone, I'm going to have you back on. And what I need is for my VA to go through all the times where we say, we'll talk about that later and cue them up. And that'll be our agenda for next time. So
good stuff.
Okay, so because we're actually coming close to time, I want to make sure I knock out a couple of the other questions we had.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was really curious about is, obviously, we all grow as managers over time, and we grow in any roles that we have. So I imagine that in some ways you're just like, look, I'm better at this than I was yesterday. And then, but I also imagine there's probably some explicit ways that you notice your experience of management at Laravel being different, because you've been managing since 2017. You're almost up on a decade of being an engineering manager. Are there ways Are there ways in which your experience of doing it today are notably different, whether it's because of the culture of the company or because things you've said, you know what, I used to do that and I realized that's not actually how I want to run a company?
Yeah. Let's try to keep this one brief, I guess. I think, as I said in the beginning, I read a lot of books. And that's sort of how I figured I'd learn about management. And it's true, you can actually pick up a lot of great things. There are a lot of tips, but if you read 300 pages, I don't know if you get 300 pages worth of, material out of that. There are maybe 3 to 5 maybe takeaways per book or something like that are actually super, super valuable. And some of them also kind of, you learn them over time. And I think management is a skill that you learn by doing it, but you do have to kind of have some people skills inherently available to you, I think. And you have to want to do it. I think that's another thing. There are lots of people in management that I think are doing it for the wrong reasons. They are seeing it as the only career path up, where I'm a very big fan of the IC track actually going quite parallel with the M track, if those abbreviations make sense to people. My point is that you need to kind of make up your own style a little bit. And that comes by kind of years of experience, as you were saying. I try to be I hope that comes across. I don't know. But I try to be fairly down to earth. Like, I'm not like very corporate or anything like that. I think people can like have real conversations with me. My number one goal coming in anywhere is really just building trust. I think that if you don't have trust, you don't get anything done. And building trust with your peers is super important. Building trust with your team is even more important. But like, the people that you manage should trust you 100%. I mean, I've famously had like people, tell me before they were like looking for a new job, or even while they were interviewing at other companies and they were still working for me, they were like, I trust you. I'm just going to tell you that I'm looking for something else right now. And to me, that's like the ultimate level of trust. Is like, I'm not just going to turn around and like punish you for that or whatever. I'm actually, here to help you. Like, how can I actually help you get that job? Or like, is there some way that we can resolve this? Or like, why are you leaving? How can we do better in the future? All these kind of things. So, being like, servant leadership is also a topic in itself. Like, I'm here to help people. I'm here to help you. Sometimes I'm helping the company. Sometimes I'm helping, individuals on the team. But I'm like really here to like act as the great unblocker. And that's sort of, that's a learned skill, I think, to see it that way.
Yeah. It's fun because, I mean, you mentioned a lot about, you have to have these people skills and stuff like that. I got to say, when so when they were first building out the leadership team at Laravel, I would, I'd see somebody get hired and I'd say, I want to, meet them, I want to connect with them. When I saw, apologies, but a burly, bearded Scandinavian programmer who had worked at places like Unity, I was so intimidated, right? I'm like, this guy is going to be some freaking code giant, Viking brilliant guy who's going to come in and he's going to say, this is how we do things, whatever. And then I met you and I was like, he's a teddy bear. He's a sweetheart, And it has been such a delight getting to know you as a friend and just kind of seeing how much you care for people. Because that's when someone says, we've got a director of engineering at a, very, very successful software company with VC backing or private equity backing, like none of these things coming from corporate, whatever, none of these things line up to all the words you just said. Servant leadership, caring more about the people, even just this recognition of management as a separate set of skills from IC, from individual contributing work. There's so many things that you just said that are very soft and empathetic and caring and people focused. And I don't think that's a soft thing, right? I think it's how to build teams and manage teams. But you're a little bit of an anomaly. And I just want to name that you're a great anomaly. Like, I'm very grateful for you, So
I appreciate that.
There's so many things I want to ask you from there, but I do want to ask, you mentioned books, and folks so often ask for books that help with learning how to be a manager, because there's books on books about how to be a programmer, right? But there's so few books that are really powerful in terms of managing, and I totally hear you. Most of these books are 300 pages of fluff with 5 to 10 really good nuggets in them. But if you had a couple books that you would recommend that have been valuable for you, do you have any you'd shout out?
Yeah, I can. It's actually been a while since I picked up one, because not because I don't believe in them anymore, but it was a little bit of an early career thing for me.
Yeah,
but 100%. There are definitely some good ones. I mean, Radical Candor. I think that's one of the all-time favorites. Kind of being straight with people. That is, I don't know. That's hard. Sometimes it's really hard. But that is also like a skill that I feel like kind of need to have as a leader, because if you don't like take action early when there are problems, or like kind of get into feedback often, that can lead to problems, right? So I think keeping in touch with people and doing it in a real way, like connecting in a real way, is important. And Radical Candor kind of at least gives you some tools and some tips and tricks and cool stories as well on that. Go ahead.
On the Business of Laravel, I want you to keep answering, but I just want to say, on the Business of Laravel podcast, there was probably 4 or 5 interviews in a row where every single person, not having heard the previous one, said Radical Candor. And I was like, this book, I love the book. And each time I was like, yes. And now I'm like, oh no, this book has really shaped a lot of the ways a lot of us are leading. But sorry, were there any other books that you wanted to share?
If there are others, I don't know if they're like so critical as this one. I mean, I think, what was the first one I ever read? It was like a little yellow book. I don't know, that doesn't help you.
Okay.
It was sort of like called something like, "Oh, now you are a manager. What now?" Like it was like almost like Management for Dummies. And I thought there were some good nuggets in there around, like importance of one-to-ones and kind of like gaining trust and all. Again, kind of the things that we like a little bit talked about. But there are some books out there that if you are aspiring to be an engineering manager or leader in any way, there are some really good resources that can be recommended. I have like a Goodreads list that I haven't opened in a million years that probably has all these in them. So if anybody ever wants that list, let me know. But otherwise, I want to shout out one thing, and is kind of the Pragmatic Engineer newsletter. I don't know if people talk about that one a lot.
No,
but this is, I think it's like a half free, half paid freemium type thing newsletter. It's definitely worth paying for if you can. But yeah, it's this guy who worked in like big tech, and he shares both kind of stories, but also like news about what's happening in tech and hiring. Everything from like, how does Meta do engineering? How does Google do on-call? Like, you just learn. I know these are not like universal standards that people should follow, but you just learn a lot in a very like digestible format. And he's a great writer. He also has a podcast, but I would more so recommend the newsletter because it has some great stories in there on like kind of both from the engineering side, but also on the engineering leadership side. Worth a read.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to it, but I just went and I was like, oh, that guy. I don't know how to say his name, so I'm not going to butcher it.
Gurgly something. Yeah.
Yes, but I've seen articles of his linked so often, and I've also shared them with other people. And I'm like, oh, everything from this guy is good. So thank you for the tip. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to think if I can fit. I think I can fit one or two more. So. You mentioned this was, your first time doing remote, but not only is it your first time doing remote, but you're also leading a remote team. I had kind of written down the phrase async engineering management, but remote and async aren't exactly the same thing. And as you pointed out, and I've said on lots of podcasts, like Titan is very synchronous in our remote, whereas 37 Signals is very asynchronous in the remote, and they're both remote. So for you, are there any ways where you can point to, these are ways where managing a remote team or managing asynchronous versus synchronous teams are, man, this is things that people don't often think about that you need to be considering and managing in order to help the team be healthy?
Yeah. So it's not the first time that I'm managing a remote team, I want to say. So I did that at Tradeshift even in the very beginning, and I made horrible mistakes. I mean, there were some expensive learnings. Let me tell you. So I hiring the right people to be managed by a remote manager is also ultra key. So finding people who can, don't need like the constant supervision and all this kind of stuff that remote management, that remote work entails, like that is so important. I mean, I think it all starts with the people and the team. Mm-hmm. And if you have the right people and people that actually both used to and kind of know and like working remote, I'm not saying that does the job for you, but it gets close.
Yeah.
And I say that because like here at Laravel, I don't think I like do a whole lot different than I would normally do. I mean, I get more time to myself now because I'm remote, obviously, and sitting at home, to reflect and think and also like do work, which, that's, you shouldn't say that as a manager because, obviously thinking and all these things also work, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
So finding the right people is important. I mean, again, one really a good example I have from early on in my career was like I hired some junior developers, somewhere, to sit and run this project. And first of all, I was a relatively new engineer. I didn't have like all the budget. Engineering manager. I didn't have all the budget, so I could like get one senior engineer or two juniors or whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll hire two juniors. This makes perfect sense. And oh boy, was that the biggest mistake of probably my entire career because nothing got done for months. Yeah. And it's not because they weren't like trying. It was just like they needed so much more help than I could give them remotely. And the team was then, like caught in just like sitting on calls all day with them, trying to help them, let's say, get up to speed. But that's just like, that's not the environment that produces good work, or efficiency for that matter. But like, I would say remote work, key things to do is like, obviously have great tools. I think tools are more important in remote work than not. Slack, we use Slack so much every day. It's a great remote work enabler. Other communication tools are available. But yeah, share status often with each other, like share demos internally. Like we have in Laravel, we have like this demo channel where people can share like small, Loom videos of what they've worked on that day or that week. Again, it doesn't have to be like get on a meeting every day, because we try really not to do that. We don't want to kill the productivity, but we want people to be able to be proud of what they do, share what they do, still, share updates so management is calm and everything. Yeah. But kind of at their own time, their own flow, what fits their process.
Yeah.
So there are some things that you need to consider doing this remotely, but yeah, I think it comes down to like really good communication, really good people, and leadership that also understands kind of how to do remote, I think is also important.
Yeah. I know we got to wrap, but I just want to tell you how much I appreciate the idea that hiring the right people is so important. I think that's true for so many things, because I see, right? And I just see so many problems that people have that they try to solve with process, or they try to solve with bringing us in at times, and more times than not, I'm just like, well, I mean, you have a whole bunch of juniors with no leadership, and the problem is not going to be solved by agile. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, scrums aren't going to fix that problem.
Probably going to make it worse.
Yeah, it always makes it worse. But it just means it takes longer for you to suss out that it makes it worse, because obviously you got to, it's only the first couple of months. So anyway, I love you acknowledging the fact that building the right team is such a foundational aspect of this and of so many other aspects of leadership. So we both said there's a million other things we could talk about today, but we are at time. Is there anything else before we wrap up that you really wish we'd be able to cover on any of these topics before we wrap for the day?
I mean, I think that I want to plug hiring a little bit. So I mean, as I think people know, Laravel is growing, and we are hiring a lot of people from all around the world for not just engineering, but I guess I am mostly involved in the engineering part of this. Yeah. And like, if people are kind of discouraged, or like how hard it is to get a job here and these kind of things, I would say, try to reach out on, like, connect on LinkedIn. If you have like a really burning desire to come work here and you feel like you're the perfect fit and all these kind of things, like, I know this is probably not the channel that most people find interesting, but like, I'm like a LinkedIn guy, which I know is maybe weird, but like, I've like built everything on LinkedIn. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to even just chat about like what does working here mean, and like how does one get a shot, and even just kind of like register your interest. I mean, the amount of people we have hired, not because they applied for a job, but because we knew they wanted a job here, and we're like, oh yeah, this person would actually be perfect. Is not insignificant. So yeah, I would say like kind of making yourself known also to the other team leads and stuff. Doesn't have to be me. But yeah, that I would like to say. And again, keep an eye on laravel.com/careers. Lots of interesting stuff there now and coming up in the future. So yeah,
I love that. It's so funny because I say our generation. I know we're the same generation, but a lot of listeners are from different generations, feel the same way. There's not a lot of people who love LinkedIn other than really businessy business people. Maybe. But every time I've interacted with LinkedIn, I've been like, you know what? I don't know if I enjoyed this, but it was valuable. And so I'm just like, I just got to get comfortable with it because it's a good tool. It's a useful network. So it
is a very useful network if you want to find professionals. Yeah. I would say it is the network. Yeah. There are lots of developers on Twitter and whatnot, but yeah, I don't know. I just really like LinkedIn for some reason. Maybe I'm strange again.
Okay, to each their own, Yeah. Andre, thank you so much for hanging out today. Thank you for sharing some of your knowledge and some of your stories. And again, thank you for sharing a leadership model of empathy and care and thinking about people so much. I think it's a really beautiful and valuable role model to have people to look towards. So I really appreciate you being who you are.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. And to the rest of you, we will see you all next time.
Bye.